All right, guys, welcome back to another episode of Within Tolerance. This is episode 39, and we're joined with Dylan and Angelo, and we're interviewing Angelo. He is the true Croatian sensation on Instagram. If you aren't following him already, definitely go follow him. We'll have a link in the podcast description and then, of course, the post. But Angelo, just give us a little bit of background, who you are, what do you do, how'd you get into manufacturing? Just start from the bottom to where you're at now, and just tell us what you got.
Cool. Awesome. Well, hey, thanks for having me. Super excited and been, seeing you guys on Instagram and seeing what you're doing. So I think you're doing a fabulous thing. So thanks for having me.
Oh, thank
Yes.
you.
Yeah, you're welcome. So where did I get started? How did I get started? So let's see, back in 1988, just a couple of years ago, um, right out of high school, when I was in high school, I always wanted to be a pilot. I wanted to grow up and be a fighter pilot and join join the Air Force and be a fighter pilot because I always thought that was badass. And then right out of high school, my father he was a CPA and he was working at a family friend of ours. They owned a large machine shop here in the San Francisco Bay Area. And in the summers, when I was a kid growing up, I would go there into this shop and hang out, uh, walking around the shop, and all these old timer manual machinist guys are making flanges on manual lathes and just chips everywhere. And I remember being fascinated by the stainless steel chips, just how they turn off, and it'd be like a long stringy chip. And I would just hang out in the shop and look at that and say, "Man, that's cool." And me and my cousin and my sister, we would just think it was really cool. So I was exposed to machining at a young age, but I never really thought of it as a career. And then right out of high school, I was a bicycle mechanic working in a local bike shop as a mechanic. A lot of people that know me, I've been on a bicycle since I could, man, for a long time. I'm still on the bicycle. So, but yeah, so I was a bike mechanic, did that, wanted to go to the military, didn't do that. Uh, was in the machine shop and talking to one of the managers there, and he was telling me how good a career is for machining and how machinists make good money. And if you're a good skilled machinist, you could get a job pretty much anywhere, write your own check basically, never out of work. Of course, who knows with the economy, but so I thought, man, yeah, that seems pretty interesting. I like to make things. I'm creative. I'm artistic. I paint also, so I always had that artistic side of me. And I thought, man, that's pretty badass. You could take a blank piece of metal and throw it on a machine and make something from nothing, from raw stock, to have a physical, like a tangible product that's usable. And so I was fascinated by that as a kid. And when I had the opportunity, I was at that shop. The My dad was telling me also for a long time that, hey, you should look into machining because these guys make good money. So the manager and then one of the machinists there, he put me on a old school manual Moriseki lathe, turning flanges, stainless steel, 304 stainless, just turning flanges all day. And I was like, man, this is cool. And then from there, put me on the Bridgeport, and then from the Bridgeport, put me on these big, large horizontal boring mills, and I learned from all these old timers. And man, these guys were tough. They there's I remember one incident. So we made some vacuum chambers, and they were huge, like 80-inch long vacuum chambers, and they had some O-ring seal surface, and we had to sand them to 32 or 16 finish, depending on where they were on the chamber. So I remember I pull up a chair. This chamber is kind of on the ground, so hunched over was kind of awkward. So I pulled up a stool, and I'm sitting there polishing, and then the owner, he's this old school Croatian guy, and he looked at me in his heavy accent. He says, "What the hell are you doing?" I said, "I'm polishing." He says, "Get that damn chair out of this shop. There's no chairs and stools in the machine shop." Now this was back in, man, this was 89 time frame. And so it was a different culture back then. And these guys are just these old timers, they're from Europe, and they're really skilled tradesmen, just badass guys. And so I at the time, I was a young guy. I was 20, 21, something like that. And I was like, man, man, these guys are kind of tough on me, but I'm glad that they were, because I learned a lot. I learned a lot of good skills from them, and just how to learn manual machining and speeds and feeds and chatter, and most of the stuff there was stainless steel, and so those types of harder materials, I got my start on that. So those types of materials, they don't scare me. So it was cool. It was cool uh, working with those guys, and then from there I went to several Bay Area machine shops here in Silicon Valley, and bounced around a little bit. And I was always hungry. I always wanted to learn, and I always wanted to be the best at my craft. And so I read whatever magazine I could get, Modern Machine Shop, CNC West, all of those, and I would read and just absorb. And my cousin and I, he worked with me too, and we had these old school scientific calculators with the big screens. We'd make these formulas for calculating bolt circles and things like that, just to make our day-to-day life easier. And so we nerded out on that kind of stuff. I went to a local community college for their machine tool technology program. I learned manual machining, and then from there I started venturing into the CNC world. And at that shop that we had, there was a Matsura MCV 2000. I can't remember the first parts of the letters, but it was a 2000. So 2000 millimeter X travel, 50 taper, large horsepower machine, 3,600 RPM, so it wasn't smoking fast. Fanuc 6M control. I remember that machine like it was yesterday, man. And
That's awesome.
so there was a couple of guys that worked on the machines. There was some turnover in that shop, and then one day, some dude, he didn't show up, or he got fired. I can't remember the details on that. But then the owner, he says, "Hey, you want to run this machine?" And that was in his heavy accent. And I was like, "Hell yeah, I'll run that thing." And I was ready. So so I jumped on that machine and figured out how to do the communications with the RS-232 cable, draped across the floor from the little office next to the machine that we did the programming on, and then figured out how to send all the code over to the machine. And man, I was just like a kid in a candy store, and I was just blown away at that opportunity, and I took it and I ran with it. And so that was, like I said, man, dude, that was a long time ago. Now that I think about it, I'm 50 now. But, woo, man. Uh, so, yeah, so I did that for a number of years. Then after that, the shop closed down for various reasons. And then I knew a bunch of people in the machining industry. So I worked here and I worked there and I worked at various shops. And I always wanted to do that. I purposely wanted to work at different places to get exposure to different types of work, different machines, different shops, different just environments. And so I did that, kind of bounced around a little bit for a couple of years, just honing my skills and learning what I could. And then when I felt like I was at the top or I couldn't learn anymore, then I talked to some other folks, and or people knew me, and they knew I was hungry, so they'd offer me a position. So I bounced around a little bit, and then man, then after a while, this one guy I used to work with, again, like I said, I was hungry. I was super hungry. So I talked this guy into, let's start a shop. Let's start a shop. I'll do whatever it takes. I'll work day and night. I had a day job. So this guy, he bought a Bridgeport mill and a manual lathe, put in his garage, and I worked there nights. Had a day job as a machinist, and worked in that shop for a couple of years in his garage. And then from there, just kind of grew a little bit. Bought a piece of junk CNC, or not a CNC, a NC. It was a Bridgeport Boss 5 control, if I remember, stepper motors. The resolution was 1000, so when you'd interpolate a circle, it was all faceted and it was just crap surface finishes. But I was just jazzed because I had an NC machine, and it even had the reel-to-reel tape. But I figured out how to connect the serial cable to it, so I didn't have to use the paper tapes. And I typed in all the code by hand. Didn't use CAM software back then, so to utilize bolt circle, CAM cycles, and all of that good stuff. Did that for a couple of years, and saved some money. And then in 1994, business started getting better, and bought my first Haas VF3 in 1995. And I remember that pretty vividly. I had some projects coming through, and I said, okay, it's time to buy a machine. So I ordered placed an order for a Kitamura my Center One, and I think that was about a 20 or so inch X travel. Not a huge machine, but boxway machine. Uh, they're reliable machines. And put an order for that machine, and that evening I got a fax. This is when before email. Got a fax purchase order for some part that was the 38 inches, and that machine that I just put an order for, the machine was 90 grand, 89, 90 grand at the time. And and the PO I got later on that evening was for a part that was 38 or 39 inches. I said, oh man, I just placed an order and I can't even machine the part on the machine that I just ordered. So uh, called my friends over at Selway Machine Tool, uh, ordered a VF3 instead of that Kitamura My Center One. So I canceled that order with another dealer and said, hey, I really want to get this machine, but the jobs I have coming through, it just can't make it. The work envelope's too small. And then to get a machine at that time with a 40-inch X travel like a Haas VF3 would have been 180, 190 grand. And I was just a startup, you know, eating mac and cheese and, not knowing where my next check is going to come through, pay rent and stuff. So I was trying to be smart and wise and not bite off more than I could chew. So I got a Haas VF3, and things just took off. 6 months later, got another machine, a VF4. Kind of took off from there, and just doing stuff for Silicon Valley shops, semiconductor industry, disk drive industry, some robotic stuff around here. And yeah, did that for 12 years, and had some things, like we have these things in life called, you get a reboot or whatever, whether it's a divorce or things like that, or economy. And I had some things happen, and so got out of that and went to work for Selway Machine Tool. They're super well known here in the west coast of the U.S., California, Northern Nevada, Oregon, Washington, Utah. And they sell Matsuras, they sell Haas, or a large Haas dealer, Banuk Robo Drills, Nakamura Tome lathes. Um, just they're a good all around shop, dealer, I should say. And they got a good reputation around here. So I went to work for them when I got out of my own shop. And so when I was with Selway, I was a service guy. So I had a toolbox, and I'd drive around and I'd wrench on, machines. I'd fix the machines, change ball screws, spindles, gearboxes, boards, software, you name it on the machine. If it was broken, I fixed it. And I was a Haas certified service engineer. And then they had an applications guy. And my background is not wrenching. My background is machining. I'm a machinist, manual and CNC, so I know G code in my head. I didn't even need CAM software at the time. But so there was, when I went to Selway, there was a couple guys already doing applications, and so I was in service. But I always want to be applications because it's what I like. So I did the service, wrenching on machines, driving around in a Haas van, service van, and I didn't just work on the Haas machines. I worked on the Nakamura lathes and the installed some of the Matsura cell systems, worked on those machines, Fanuc robo drills. And so it was fun. It was a cool learning experience. It's cool to get into that, because when you start wrenching on machines and you program the machines, you get into things like tuning the servos and all of that. So you can change the performance of the machine with parameters and all things like that. So it really helps if you can program, and it really helps if you can turn a wrench, and I could do both. So I did that. And then and it was around 2008. Was it? Man, dude, as I age, the years slip by me. But there was a recession, and a couple of these guys, they got let go. And then one of the guys, the general manager there, he said, "Hey, we're big layoff, but because you can do applications and service, we're keeping you. Now here's your chance to just focus more on applications, which means when a customer buys a machine, I would go to their shop and train them on their new machine. And so I focused on that for a number of years, and I was doing 90% applications and 10% service. I'd sometimes go install a machine, stick around for a day or 2 days or a week, and help them set up and run the machine. So that was a lot of fun. Did that for a number of years, and then couple of the customers I worked with, they would offer me jobs because when you're in that position, you're in different shops all the time, and people think that you're there solving their problems, so they want to hire you. So I got some offers and never really thought much about them. And this one company, they had a operation in Mexico, and I was kind of ready for a midlife crisis, try something different, change of scenery and environment. So I took that opportunity, and they made pistons down south of the border, and they had all Haas machines, mills, and lathes. And I was down there running programming, kind of revamping how they did things. They did things in a way that was done for the last 20 or 30 years. They're a 90-year-old company or something like that. So kind of revamped how they did things there, brought it up into modern technology, did that for a little bit, and then had a buddy at Tesla. And again, I was out of the Bay Area, so I'd come back and visit family. And when you're away from home or family or children, things like that, you kind of miss home. So after a couple of years, I returned back to California, worked at Tesla in their R&D prototype lab. That was a cool place, very fast-paced environment. Worked with some cool folks there. That was just, man, we call that place. So it wasn't Tesla, it was Stressla. the the culture there, man, it was everything was a crisis. Maybe that's a little strong. Everything there, every parts that came across our desk, they needed it yesterday. We didn't have the luxury of waiting a couple of weeks. There were times we may take these big billet blocks, throw them on the machine, get the roughing cycle going, because the engineers needed it super fast. So we'd throw it on the machine, get like an adaptive roughing cycle going because it would take a couple of hours because it's such a big block. And then while it was roughing, we'd be at the computer programming all the finishing ops. And 1, 2, 3 day turnarounds were common, and these are pretty complex parts. So the pace was quick. The time there was quick. It felt like 10 years, but it was only 4. and and it was cool, man. Worked with some cool dudes there. A lot of guys from there. We're all still, we still talk. There's some guys at Facebook and Apple and Google and various cool places that the guys from that shop that we've all left, and now I'm at Autodesk. So it was cool road, cool path. I can go into more detail, but we'd be here all year. I everybody that knows me knows that I'm super passionate about what I do, and I love just sharing all my experiences and teaching the next generation of machinists. And what I see now with the Instagram and the Insta Machinist community with social media, man, if I had nothing like that when I was 20 years old, when I was 18 years old, when I was in my when I was 25. If I had an issue, I couldn't just get online and say, "Hey, I have this chatter issue. What do I do?" So, yeah, dude. So it's just really cool being part of this industry and having the community out there. And we're super transparent. People hit me up all the time, DM me, or just on my Instagram page with questions or whatever. So I'm always transparent because I always say, man, if something happens, I'm not no longer here tomorrow. All of my knowledge will go to waste. So I want to share everything that I possibly can with everybody out there. And I'm very transparent. I've worked with guys in the past where they had trade secrets or just skills, and they didn't want to share it because they wanted to be that guy that was the badass in the shop. Well, I'm the opposite of that. I want to be, I want to be respected in that role, but I would also want to share with everybody so everybody can have that opportunity.
Totally, and we really appreciate that. I mean, I think that's definitely one of the reasons I wanted to get you on the podcast is I've seen how much you do with Autodesk and all the demos you do and all that stuff, and it's it's really cool to see, how much you put back into the industry.
Thank you. I love it. Super, super, super happy to be part of it. So
that's great. So, I guess describe what you do at Autodesk for those who are listening and don't know what you do. I mean, I know that people have probably seen you at a lot of trade shows, but what is your title, and what do you take care of on the Fusion side?
all right, great. So when I started Autodesk, I was came over to do some testing, validation, things like that. Then from there, I went to product management, and then from product management, what I'm doing now, I'm on the customer success team. And on the customer success team, I help customers get up to speed with Fusion and everything about, obviously, with the CAM focus. Of course, I do modeling and all of that stuff. But yeah, with the CAM focus in Fusion. And a large part of what I do at Autodesk is also working with other companies, trade shows, like you'd mentioned. Haas Automation have a fantastic relationship with them that started back when I was worked for the HFO Selway, and so I knew a lot of those guys that are making things happen at Haas currently. And so when I joined Autodesk and we had to work with Haas, it was an easy transition because I've already known some of these guys, and I'll also know because I was with an HFO, kind of know how the dynamics work. So that was a natural fit for me to take on that role of coming up with demos for the trade shows. So I'll design the parts, I'll come up with the work holding, the tools, the tool paths, the strategy, what operations I'm going to do, how I'm going to hold the part. I also work with the guys to see, well, what do they want to highlight on their machine? How can we make their machine look good? Also. So it's not just how can I show what we can do with Fusion, but I also focus on how can I highlight what this Haas machine that I'm working on, how could I highlight that to help Haas sell machines. And so that's a lot of what I focus on now. And I'm hoping to be able to spend some time creating more content and YouTube on my YouTube channel. And we do live streams with Autodesk, things like that. So on a day to day, I'm working with customers, helping them with their problems on Fusion. We have in product chat that we've been working on for a while now. It's in the works to be released to everybody, but there's a scaling thing that we have to work on. So that's coming. So I work with customers, help them with their issues. I also work on planning for future shows and trade shows, and I work with other machine tool vendors, machine tool companies, not just Haas, but Mazak and other guys, so that we keep that partnership and promote, everybody for the good of the machining industry. So that's kind of what I do now on a day to day, and I just love it. There's not enough hours in the day, man, to
Well, that's
to
awesome.
yeah.
Yeah, you've done some really cool demos. Like I love the spark plug bottle opener you've done. I'm sure I've seen a few other ones that you've done, and they're always really interesting. And like you said, they show off the machinery as well as Fusion, so it's really cool for sure.
Yeah, awesome. Yeah, that spark plug. I remember I was doing that, and I was literally went down to the auto parts store locally, bought a spark plug, broke out my calipers, and started measuring it, and designed it in Fusion. I did the sketch, and then revolved it, and I started adding the features on the end of it where the electrode is, and I was starting to model in all those details. And on my desk, I had a titanium metal printed titanium bottle opener that was done in with generative with the lattice like structure, and that was sitting on my desk, and it was about the same size as a spark plug. And I knew I was doing this spark plug for a trade show for Haas for the SEMA show in Las Vegas, and also PRI Performance Racing Industry in Indianapolis. So very car heavy industry, right? So I wanted it to be automotive related. And then as I was drawing in that detail on the end of the spark plug, number one, I thought, man, that's going to take a lot of cycle time. And when we do these demos, there's certain criteria we want to keep it in the 6 to 8 to 10 minute time frame, no more than that. The shorter the better, because then we can give out more products. One thing that some companies do, they have a part in the machine and they're making one part a day or one part the whole show, and they don't give anything away. And when people walk up to the booth, we like to give them something to take home or to walk away with. And so when I did that spark plug, it was just, I thought, okay, that's too much work. The cycle time will be too long if I create all that detail, and I have tiny end mills, and I also have to think about how many turret stations or live tools can I have on the machine and all of that. So I said, well, heck, why don't I just make a bottle opener on this end? So I took my calipers and modified that, or measured that bottle opener and modified the end of the spark plug, and that's where that one came from. So that one's a super hit, man. I had someone come up to me a year later at the same show, and this gentleman was from out of the country. I can't remember, was it South America or Europe? I can't remember details on that, but he asked me if I'd be interested in making some for them, and I'm like, sure, however we could help. So it's good
That's
when
awesome.
people, yeah, it's good when people memorize or remember or can remember me based on some of my creations. And then there's a guy out there out of Florida, Jairo, that guy is
Hmm.
at 75 hard machinist. He was doing a giveaway. He asked me, "Hey man, I'm doing this uh, giveaway or something. Do you mind if I use that?" So I sent him the model, and he made a bunch and gave them away. So that was cool. I like I said, I like giving back to the community. I don't hold anything. I don't want to sell it and make money. I just want everybody to use it, and anything I make, I'm happy to share. So it's good stuff.
Totally.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's awesome. Yeah, and those things that you can take home are really, I mean, they keep that brand around for so much longer than, like you said, the one that you just see in the machine. I mean, I've got coasters, and things like that from companies that are still sitting on my bedside table and get used every day. So
Yeah, that's awesome. That is so cool.
So, Angelo, you talked about you were tailoring some parts to show off certain machine tools and kind of what they can do. I'm curious, walk us through a little bit of, some of those parts you made, obviously the bottle opener, but what are some other criterias for, setup parts and giveaway parts?
Yeah, great. Excellent question. So, like I mentioned a moment ago, we like to keep the cycle time down to a certain range. And a couple other things that we do. So, I think about what's the target audience that will be at the trade show. I think about what machine I'm gonna do it on, and what type of cycle time I'm going to need to, I have to think of all of that, because yeah, you can think of something like, who everybody remembers that bull that was made at IMTS on the Hermle.
hmm
That thing was super awesome. It was badass. That thing, everybody remembers that as well. So those demos that are memorable are just people know. So um, I think about something that would be fit to the target audience, highlight the machine, and highlight whatever tools I have available. And then another couple other things I focus on is, let's say I've got a job and it has a half-inch end mill, and that end mill is going to run for 6 of those 9 minutes. Instead of letting that single end mill run for 6 minutes, and then I go to another tool or drilling or pocketing or another toolpath strategy, maybe drilling and tapping or thread milling or something like that. Instead of letting it run 6 minutes, I'll run that tool, instead of 6 minutes, I'll run it for maybe a minute, and then I'll jump to another operation. Maybe it's another feature. Maybe I rotate the trunnion or the platter, or if it's a 5-axis machine, and I'll make the machine move so that when people walk up to the machine in the booth, they don't just walk up to the window and look in it and see a half-inch end mill moving around for 6 minutes, because after a minute or two, they're gonna look at that and they say, okay, I've seen enough, I'm moving on. So what I focus on is, okay, I'm gonna let that tool sling chips on the sheet metal or on the glass like it's hailing, just clink clink clink, when you hear that, and then after 60 seconds, uh, you know, retract that tool away, wrap it away, do a tool change, maybe make the table dance a little bit, uh, and then have it index and do something else to keep audience engaged so that they see more happening than just the tool moving around, that the machine's actually moving, doing tool changes, repositioning, things like that. I'll purposely make the, on a 5-axis machine, I'll purposely create operations so that I have to index or use do 3+2, just so that people see that, because people see it in one orientation, machining, adaptive, clearing, or pocketing, or facing. And then when the tool retracts and then the table tilts and rotates, then you get those oohs and ahs out of the crowd. So I think about all that kind of stuff, and just to keep it interesting when people walk up, so that they're there for 30 to 30 seconds to 2 minutes. They see a tool change and they see the machine moving, instead of just sitting there doing a 3D cut for 10 minutes. That gets boring after a little bit.
That must be a nice new challenge for you, rather than machining for time or for money. You're being a showman with the machine, which is kind of unique.
Exactly, yeah, like an artist. Yeah, it's there's an art to it, and it is fun, and I feel grateful that I'm in a position where I'm able to do that. And when I was a young guy learning machining, I remember going to the trade shows and seeing the guys running the machines, and I always said, "Man, I want to be that guy someday." And so
And now you are.
now I am. Now I get to do that, and it's just awesome. It's a lot of fun, and I love the opportunities that Autodesk allows me, that they give me. I get to do that, and it's like a dream.
Totally. So you work with a lot of these tooling companies too, in addition to machine tool partners,
Hmm.
for all these demos. Do you have any favorite tools that you've come across, or tooling companies that you kind of go back to every time you're trying to do this?
Yes, yes. My friends over there at Lang. If you guys see my demos, most of them I use Lang. It's just rock solid, bulletproof, stable, rigid. They're always very supportive. Anytime we're doing a demo, just say, "Hey, we got this coming up." They're on board. 5th axis also. Lindex Nikken for tool holders, cutting tools, helical and Harvey, Harvey Performance helical tool, Swift Carve, Iscar, Camplete, all these guys. Anytime I reach out and say, "Hey, I got this show coming up, trade show, whether it's a Haas demo days, or an IMTS show, or SEMA, or PRI, or FabTech, any of these shows," I just phone call or email, and all these companies just, "What can we do to help you, Angelo?" And everyone's been really great working with all these companies.
That's awesome. I'm
Yeah,
jealous.
it's
You kind of get your pick of the best right there.
yeah, I do get to choose. It's pretty cool.
Yeah,
It's
that's
pretty
really, really
cool.
cool.
Yeah, and then sometimes people they say they're gonna help you, but then when it comes time to help, they don't. So then I don't rely on them anymore. It's the reality is, when I got a demo or a show, I got to get it done, and uh, time is of essence, and it's in addition to supporting Fusion customers and doing my day-to-day job. Just it just adds more work for me to do these trade shows, which I love. Come designing the part, or figuring out the material, coming up with the tool list, all that stuff. So when I ask these companies, they know that I need it. And I've had sometimes, not these companies that I mentioned, but I had some other companies in the past that kind of let me down, left me holding the bag basically, and I'd be arrive at the show and tools aren't there, and you're at a trade show. It's not you're not at the luxury of being at your shop where you can just go, to the toolbox and pull out another end mill. Well, I don't have that luxury. What I have is what I brought. I have a Pelican case with all my tools, indicators, calipers, Allen wrenches, uh, gloves, things like that. So I arrive with what I need, and sometimes they'll ship me stuff to me before I go, and I take it with me. But it's also just easier if I have them ship it to the show, and that's kind of nerve wracking, because some people are like, "Wait a minute, you're coming 2-3 days before the show, never made this part, and you show up at the show." and you're proving it at the show. Yes, I am. Yes, I am. And there are some times where I have been up till 5 in the morning the day of the show because something happened or something didn't arrive or a strategy didn't work or it just crap hit the fan and I got to change gears or try something different. There's been several times where, yeah, I worked all night for 2 nights or 3 nights. And my colleagues are also very supportive when they're there. They're very helpful. Some of the guys that I work with, Adam Smith, Rob Gia, CJ Abraham, Tim Paul, one ear Tim. So everybody rallies and we all get it done. So, yeah, there's sometimes I'll prove it in advance, which would be a luxury. But let's face it, the reality is in the machining world, it's it's last minute, last minute to get it done because we're doing other things, and even if you have 6 months to deliver a job, you're going to be working late the day before to get it done because you're like, I got 6 months, so therefore I can start on something else and bang this out before I get to that. So I'm sure
That hits a
all
little too close
machinists.
to home.
Yeah, I'm sure everybody can relate to that. The job work, late nights because you got to deliver the next day or, things like that.
Just
So,
thinking of Dylan.
Yeah, I've
right?
definitely had my fair share of late nights at the shop,
Oh yeah, sleeping in the
for
shop.
sure.
I've slept in the shop. I've had an air mattress behind when I was at Tesla. I had an air mattress behind the Mazak machine. Um,
Oh, jeez.
Dude, yeah, yeah. Slept in the shop on the floor while on an air mattress. Because stuff needed to get done and you didn't have the luxury of going home. You had to get it done. And,
Right.
I
Oh,
always
yeah.
felt that if I'm dependent on and I can't get it done, someone will replace me.
Oh, yeah.
And I don't want
Yeah.
that to happen. So I'm going to do everything in my power to make sure that doesn't happen.
That's a good way to look at it, for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
So another question we had written down here was, out of the machines you've worked with in your career, which has been your favorite to work with, program parts set up on, and this could be, trade show demos or at Stressla or wherever you have been in the past.
Excellent question. I've got a few. Haas VF2, man, that machine is perfect size, perfect footprint, perfect capabilities. You're not stretched. You're not reaching into the machine. You're not breaking your back. So you can make a lot of cool stuff on that machine. It's a very affordable machine. Um, Nakamura NTMX when I was with Selway Machine Tool. We sold a few of those, and I'd go and uh, train on those. And that machine was just fun. It's a twin spindle upper turret, or 5-axis on the upper turret. Lower turret had 24 tools, static 12 or rotating, 11-axis machine.
Jeez.
Yeah, that thing was sweet. And then they had another version. It was called the Super NTX that had dual turrets on the bottom, single turret above, and just making some stuff for a military defense company and just making stuff that would go on top of a military vehicle was a lot of fun. And after um, machining it at this particular company, I'm not going to say any names, we got to go out and use what we just made. So it was a lot
Oh,
of
that's
fun.
cool.
It was fun, man. So that was a fun machine. Mazak Integrexes are very versatile machines. Just they kind of have that market. Matsura MX850 at Tesla was a fun machine to run. Yeah, so there's a few. There's a few.
Yeah, you've worked on the gamut of, dream machines for a lot of people. That's really, really cool.
Yeah, yeah, and not only mills or not only lathes. I've worked on mill turns. I've worked on just standard lathes. I've worked on standard mills. I've worked on horizontal mills. I've worked on 5-axis machines. I've worked on machines with pallet systems, and then the mill turn machines with many axes. So there's all these machines I'm super comfortable on, and I know there's some guys out there that they're considered a mill guy or considered a lathe guy. Well, I want to be considered all around guy. So I was never scared to try it. And I think turning is easier in my opinion, especially just a standard 2-axis lathe. Uh, Things that make that easy, the work holdings include it's part of the machine. So you just throw some stock in the chuck or the collet, and you don't have to worry about how are you going to hold it. So, and then you got X and a Z, and you're done. And what diameter you turn it down to, you set your offsets is pretty easy. And then milling, you have to be a little more creative when you're going from op one, flipping apart to op two. You got to think about how are you going to hold it. Oh, and then now you got 3, 4, or 5 axes or sides to hit, I should say. And then you got to think ahead. Well, how the heck am I going to hold that once I remove this material? And when I remove this material, is the part going to warp on me? And do I need to maintain these tolerances and any critical tolerances or features or plating specs you got to be worried about. So there's a lot to go on, a lot going on in all parts. But yeah, I think turning's easier.
So, in that same vein, what's your favorite demo that you've done? You already talked about the spark plug. Is that your favorite, or have you done another one that you like more?
The spark plug, I'd say, was the one that was when you think of music and you think of those one-hit wonders. I don't want any of my stuff to be considered a one-hit wonder, but everybody knows that, and it was just one of those. It just popped in my mind as I was sitting on my desk. It's not something I was planning for a long time. It was just one of those things that, hey, it worked out. It turned out great. It showed off the machine, and we had lines of people at the SEMA show waiting in line for that machine to finish those parts. We couldn't make them fast enough, and we ran out of material, and we had to order more material. And
Oh
so
my
that was
goodness.
at SEMA, that was at FabTech, and that was at PRI. Every show that demo runs at, we cannot make them fast enough. So some things we've discussed is make them in bulk in advance and bring them to the show. Maybe a few hundred or maybe 1,000 of them. I don't know, maybe 1,000 is a lot, but we literally had people waiting in line. And I've had guys walk up to me, the owner of the machine shop, the owner of the automotive company who was there visiting SEMA, didn't know anything about machining, but had a screenshot of my post from Instagram saying, "Hey, my machinist said don't come back without this spark plug." So for that reason, I'd say that's my favorite, just because of the interest it got, and it still gets. Now that was 2 years ago now at SEMA 2 years ago. So yeah, I'd say that's my favorite. And then the one I just did at SEMA this past year, in 2019, Haas just came out with their UMC 500, small footprint machine. Everybody knows they had the 750, and this UMC 500. And when I was working with them early on, they really wanted to highlight that machine. I was like, hell yeah, I get to run this brand new machine. And I have people hit me up say, hey, now that you've ran that machine, what do you think about it? So I, like you said earlier, I get to run the machines and the newest of the newest and the newest technology. So it's a lot of fun. So that demo that I just did was also really cool. And if I remember correctly, it was about 12-minute cycle time, and people were just blown away because we were slinging chips and thread milling, tapered pipe threads and things like that. And then doing some engraving, and people were like, wait a minute, you did the threads on this mill? Yes, I did. And wait, you mean you didn't use a tap, you used a thread mill? Yeah, and it's tapered thread? Yes, that's correct. So, and then on the lathe, I had some pipe fitting, some uh, parts that would mate and would fit together. So we had 4 machines at the this last year in 2019. So one thing we were talking about was making sure that all these parts fit together. So it was cool having the TM1 mill, TL1 lathe, and the ST 15Y and the UMC 500. All those parts were kind of interchangeable. So that was also a lot of fun. And for next year, I already know what I'm making, and it's going to utilize multiple machines, multiple components. It's going to be an assembly, and people are going to walk away with something that's going to be badass. And I can't spoil it right now.
Awesome.
Yeah,
Well, we'll have
I
to
already
watch
talked
out
to
for it.
Haas. Yeah, I already talked to my friends at Haas, and yeah, we know what we're making for next year. And and that one I'm not going to wait till 2 days before to
I was about to say,
test it,
start it
prove it.
now.
Yeah. So we already talked to Haas about it. I'll be heading down there. Well, this was before this current uh, pandemic, obviously, but there was talk about me heading down there. Once spring hits, each month go down there and make a part. Go down next month, prove the part. Get the work holding, any soft jaws or tooling, get all that dialed in. Once it's tool paths are done, parts proven, wrap it up, bundle it up, package it, and let it wait for SEMA show, and then do it on the lathe, and it'll be two mills and two lathes, and it's going to be a sweet part. And I think it will have a lot of attention, very similar to the spark plug. So watch out for that.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Very cool. So speaking of modeling and all of this, let's kind of dive into Fusion because that's a big part of your job. What do you think are 3 or 4 or a couple features in Fusion that are underused or not well known that you think people should know about?
Okay. Probing, man, probing in Fusion is so easy. It's
Uh-oh.
well, uh-oh.
We've been shaming Peyton because he has a DM2 and he needs a probe ASAP.
Oh. Oh man, yeah, you gotta get a probe. That probing is
Oh
big.
no.
You didn't get a probe?
I did not.
Oh
Not yet,
man,
he didn't.
that's like buying a car without an air conditioning, man.
Or without tires.
Or without tires, yeah, exactly. Yeah, probing is super useful, super helpful because you can use it to set up, and you can also use it for in-process inspection. That's very, very helpful. Another one that's super simple is drilling holes, man. In Fusion, I've used other CAM software. Uh, yeah, I've been using the CAM software for 30 years, and I remember I'd see some jobs come across my desk where you've got quarter 20, you've got a 1032, an 832, a 632, and a half 13 thread. So I'm like, man, I have to do a spot drill, a drill, and a tap on all 5 of those. What a pain in my rear end to program that. I have to dot every I, cross every T. Super painful. I'd literally see that and just cringe. And I'm like, oh man, that's gonna take forever to program that. Whereas in Fusion programming, I just wrote a blog. Also, it's that's gonna be coming out pretty soon. Uh, how Fusion is the easiest programming in Fusion is the easiest part of my day. Whereas I've used other CAM software where a job you have to program, you'd be like, oh man, I'm gonna be here for 6 hours programming this thing. And Fusion, it's the opposite. It's if you rely on the defaults, so you can literally pick a strategy, for example, facing. You can say, I want to face with this 2-inch shell mill and hit OK. And they'll give you a toolpath. You can say, I want to do 3D adaptive with this tool, say 3/4 end mill, and hit OK. You'll get a toolpath. Other CAM software, you have to go through 3, 4, or 5 pages of answering questions and tick boxes and drop downs, and then you hit OK. And it should work, but the beauty of Fusion is rely on the defaults, man. That's what I tell people when you're learning Fusion. Don't think too hard. Pick a strategy, even the 3D strategies like scallop or things like that. Just pick a strategy and select the tool and hit OK. You'll get something. Other ones, tool orientation. Tool orientation, I use another CAM software. And if you were doing a 3+2 job, and let's say you're doing some work on one face, and then you wanted to flip it over and index like your fourth or your 5-axis machine to do some work on the sides at whatever angle. Fusion, you just go tool orientation, hit the Z face, normal, boom, done. That's it. There's no jumping through hoops. There's no setting this or changing that or 5 minutes of prep to get it. And we've got some UI stuff coming down the pipeline in Fusion to make that actually easier as well. I'm not gonna.
Awesome.
Yeah, that's gonna make that even easier. Steep and shallow. The cool thing about steep and shallow is you can constrain your angle so you only use a steep strategy or you only use a shallow strategy. So I've had some jobs where some of the tool paths didn't work as ideally as I'd like them, and I was able to use steep and shallow to use it as only a steep or only a shallow, and you can control that. So that's super helpful. And then live tooling on a lathe. If you could program a mill in Fusion, you could program live tooling on a lathe. You can just go from turning an OD to roughing an OD, finishing an OD, doing some threading, single point threading, and then hop over and mill some wrench flats or at the end of the spark plug, things like that. So those are super easy: probing, drilling holes, tool orientation, steep and shallow, uh, live tooling on a lathe. Those are some tools that I find very useful that other CAM software is not as easy. Fusion just makes it super easy.
Oh, awesome. Oh, and I guess in the same vein, what is your absolute favorite thing about Fusion? I mean, obviously, CAM is super easy. I completely agree.
Mm-hmm.
But if you could narrow it down to one thing that Fusion does that is your absolute favorite, what is that?
Mm. I already discussed the defaults. Allow it to rely on the defaults. It's hard to pick just one. I love how it's parametric and it's all tied together. Uh, just super easy to make changes. Designing your fixturing and your put your table and the vise and the work holding and create some joints and motion links where you can create things like your stock, for example. I just posted something on Instagram the other day to update the stock, and everything just updates. So that wasn't just one thing; it's a combination of a few things that just makes Fusion, in my opinion, just super badass and easy to use.
So, actually, talking about that leads right into one of our listener questions from Windmill Motorsports. He asked, "What's better, probing or modeling everything and using a master file with joints and modeled stock and using the same origin all the time, or a little bit of both? And then, secondly, is this really taxing your computer, and do you need a really good computer to do that?"
Excellent question. Uh, I do like to put a little work up front. It obviously depends on um, deadline and if you're in a job shop environment and you need to finish this in 5 minutes or 5 hours. But I always tend to lean towards bringing the machine table in, and then bring in the vise or uh, the Lang bases, and then the vise on top of that, and modeling everything with joints, and then placing the part in there. Because then, when it comes to simulation and things like that, it's a lot easier to visualize and see it. It is a little more work up front, but I like to pay attention to those types of details and just get that in there, and also just nerd out on that stuff. It just looks super badass when you have the table and then the vices and the stock and then the part model, and you're able to create a tool path off of that. So I lean towards using like a master file where I can just have that always set. So yes, there is work up front, but if you have in your shop, you've got a VF2 and you've got a master base, whether it's like a Lang base, and then you have the modular vices that come in and out of that. You could spend some time up front to create that and have that as a master file or master template. And then for the rest of your career in that shop on that machine, you get a new job, you simply insert that model into that already created assembly. And within a couple of minutes, you're already creating toolpath, and it's all tied to that model as far as selections. For example, on your depth, on your heights tab, you can say stay away from this jaw by 50 thou. And regardless of where you move your part in space, in X, Y, or Z, it's parametrically driven off of those selections. So yeah, that's how I do it. And uh, there was the second part of that was, is it taxing on the computer? I use it just a laptop, a MacBook Pro, and I have no issues. I have a MacBook Air also I use when I'm traveling on the airplane, and I don't have any issues with that either. So Fusion's designed to work on uh, a lot of platforms, whether it's Windows or Mac, and um, it works really well. So you don't need a super duper horsepower machine to use it and to take advantage of some of those things. And over time, as Fusion gets more mature as a product, it's doing better with larger assemblies. In the early days, it kind of would stutter and have some issues, but the Fusion team is doing an excellent job with making sure that those types of issues are not happening.
Awesome. And then so you're saying use a master file. Do you then use probing to refine your origin point and all that, or?
Yes, for the first stop, depending on, let's say you have a large chunk of stock and you've got plenty of material all the way around, where you're gonna hit the top of the part and you're gonna walk around the part and you're not worried so much. So in those types of instances, depending on what I'm doing, I won't probe that. But at the trade shows, I will, because I'll take a piece of material, drop it in the vise, and I'll eyeball it on center in the vise. But what if you're 100th out to the left, or 3 millimeters to the right, or things like that? So then I will go in there and probe it just to ensure that when you do that first op and the stock that's remaining, when you flip it over for the secondary ops, that bit of material, some people call it the hat or the lip or whatever brim you want to call that's even. So when you get to the secondary operations, it's even material removal, and you don't have any surprises of excess stock on one side, and you go to do an adaptive or something. And I've seen things like that where people aren't careful, and I've had even trade shows where I wasn't loading, or my immediate colleague, like say CJ or Tim Paul or one, these guys, in loading the part. It could be a sales guy from the HFO loads a part, tightens the vise, and hits start. Well, if he placed it 100th out to the left or 3 millimeters to the right, sometimes you have some issues if you're doing adaptive and you're super deep on the axial engagement, and then it goes around on the radial engagement, and instead of taking 20%, you're 80% of the tool diameter, and you have a break. So I always try to think ahead to avoid those types of crashes, especially at a trade show, because that's when you don't want that to happen.
Yeah.
Because number one, there's eyes on you, and everybody, if you've ever seen, is it a meme where there's these I can't remember the animal sticking their head out of the ground and they're looking to the side, and the meme, or it says when the someone crashes the machine in the shop, you know what I'm talking about?
Yeah.
Everybody has that look like, you just trashed your machine, you idiot. And then all eyes are on you. So that's the one place you never want that to happen, but especially at a trade show, because then it's like you just don't want that to happen. So yeah, I do probe to ensure reliability and consistency across the board. I also use torque wrenches, because I've had some instances where, say, I tighten it and to me it's tight, and then someone 50 pounds less than me goes to tighten it and it's tight to them, or a guy 100 pounds bigger than me, he tightens it, and you have all these differences. And so I find using the torque wrench really helps with that consistency, probing and a torque wrench, especially even on thin wall parts.
Gotcha.
Okay. Yeah.
And then one last question we have for you is, what is your favorite machining story to tell?
Favorite machining story to tell?
So it could be the worst crash you've ever seen, the most fun you've ever had machining,
The
the
dumbest
weirdest
service
part.
call you've had?
Yeah.
Yeah, I got a couple. Don't know how much time we got, but I got a couple good ones. Uh, one was a service call, and I'm in California, and the customer was in Nevada, near the Reno area. And I didn't take the call; I was just deployed to the call. It was something with their M code wasn't working, and so I make the drive. It's about 4 hour drive or so to the location, and I get up and I leave and I drive up. I get to the customer, and he shows me what the problem is, and the M code was on the wrong line. So the way an M code works is uh, it's the M code is satisfied after everything else is satisfied. So let's say you're milling across a 10-inch long part, and you say G1 X minus 10 inches M8. So it will plunge down to the proper depth. It will mill across that 10 inches. And then once everything is satisfied, then the coolant will turn on because the M8 is in that same line. So my fix for that was I just moved the M8 in the line before. So that was a 4-hour drive each way, 8-hour round trip drive, and the guy got billed for 8 hours of travel time or something like that. And all he had to do was move the M8 to the previous line, and so that was kind of one of those, hey, your programming your the format's wrong. And on the phone, the problem he described was a coolant pump wasn't turning on. So I thought, okay, maybe it's an I/O issue with the board, or maybe I need to change the coolant pump or something. And it was literally less than 5 minutes. I was in and out. I looked at his code. I said, oh, this is what's happening. When I explained it to him, then he realized, oh man, okay. Once everything else is satisfied in that block, then the coolant will come on. So yeah, that was a kind of a funny one. Yeah, same thing. Like if you have a position in X Y, G54, G0, G90, X something, Y something, then an M3S, it will position there, then the spindle will come on. So things
Right,
to
so you can be into the part before you turn on your spindle.
Exactly. So yeah, you need to understand some how G code works to make sure you don't make an oops. And then another funny one, it was a Haas ST or SL40. I can't remember what vintage it was, but it was the big Haas lathe. It was the owner of the shop crashed a machine. The ball screw was through the back of the sheet metal where and there was just loose ball bearings in the chip pan, and where the conveyor was.
Jesus.
You see, as a service guy with working for a dealer going to different shops, you just see some catastrophes, and where machines are just destroyed, and it just breaks your heart when you see this beautiful CNC machine just smashed. So yeah, those are some funny ones, man. Those are some funny ones.
Those are great.
Yeah.
Well,
I got one more question for you, actually,
okay.
Angelo.
Yeah.
So we talked about M codes there a second ago. So I'm curious. This was a debate we had on our podcast, I think last week, and so Dylan's question to our audience was, how do you properly call up a tool in MDI? Do you do M6 then the tool number, or do you do the tool number then M6?
I do the tool number and then M6. That's how I do. That's how I've been doing it since the late 80s. And the reason why I do that, because the first thing in the line that I see is the actual tool I'm calling rather than the M6. So as soon as I see the T, I know the M6 is going to be soon thereafter, but I always select the T first. What
That's
what
fair.
was the debate?
Well, the whole debate came up because I always do the M code first for a tool change. That's just how I learned, and that's what stuck. And
Yeah.
I had some coworker at my day job. We were having some issue with the machine, and the last thing in the MDI that was still up was my tool change, which was M6 or whatever. And he started giving my other coworker who was there and the one having problems shit about having the M code first. And I was like, well, that was actually me. And that's how I'm always going to do it, because that's how I think about it. I tell the machine, change tool to this tool, not give me, or not tool 3, give me. It's give me tool 3. And he was like,
Exactly.
okay. And so, but the amount of hate that has come out of that little rant I had on our last episode has been hilarious.
Oh
That's
man,
awesome.
that is funny. Yeah, and there is no right or wrong. There's no right or wrong. It's just, like you said, that's how you learn, and that's how you've been doing it. And I learned to put the T first. Another reason why I do that is when you do pre-staging of tools, you just put the T number without the M6, and if you have a side mount tool changer, it will stage it for you. That's called pre-staging.
Yeah, totally. On my Kitamura, that's exactly how I do it. But
Exactly.
it's M6 T whatever and then T whatever after on the next
Exactly.
line. So
Yeah.
yeah,
So no right or wrong. It's just for personal preference.
yeah, exactly. Um, well, we really appreciate you coming on, Angelo. Is there anything before we wrap up that you want to plug? You said you had a blog coming up, a YouTube channel. Let people know where to see you and what to look forward to.
Yeah. I just, all these guys that I work with on a day-to-day basis at Autodesk, like Al Watmo, Tim Paul, CJ, Jamie, Brad, Jeff. There's just so many people that I work with that I really enjoy working with. And then also on the Instant Machinist community, I appreciate what you guys are doing here. And then I got buddies like Dr. Phil up in Canada, MJK, and then Rob Lockwood, James Mayette at Selway, Mr. Bill Selway himself, and his brother Dan. Just and all my buddies that I worked at the previous shop, I had some cool guys there. I talked about them earlier that they've all since left Tesla and now at other places. I got Nick, Spencer, man, Sam, Dan, Jamie, Greg, Tim. Those dudes are super cool. Hugh, this dude was hella funny, man. This guy was just a funny guy. And then Rob Lockwood, man, that guy. At Fusion Academy, I was talking to him and his wife about art because I do paint. I paint also. I do used to be a graffiti artist, and I now paint abstracts on canvas. And I promised him a painting, and that was at Fusion Academy. And I saw that he posted something on the Instagram saying, "Cool guy," or gift to the community or something like that. But ask him where my painting is. so, so Rob, I'll need your address, brother, so I could send you something. I've got something for you.
Well, that's great. And they can find you, the True Croatian Sensation, on Instagram. Is that also your YouTube channel?
Great question. I need to figure out how to change it. My YouTube channel is just my name, Angelo Juras. But now that you brought it up, and you're not the first person that said that, suggested I should have the True Creation Sensation as my YouTube channel. So currently it's Angelo Juras, first and last name. I'm going to dig in or either maybe recreate a channel or see if I can't change the name or update the name.
Awesome. Well, we'll make sure to link to that in the Instagram post that we make along with this episode, and we'll also link to it in the podcast notes. And again, thank you so much for coming on. We really appreciate it. It was a ton of fun to get to talk to you and know you a little better. I mean, I'd like I said, I'd seen you at a couple trade shows and stuff, but I had no idea the kind of the background that you had and how much it's just really cool to get to know people a little more through this.
Yeah, thanks, man. I greatly appreciate it, guys, having me on. Both you, Dylan, and Peyton, and yeah, super cool. And like those guys out there, Mr. John Saunders, Grimsmo, Lawrence. I got some other dudes that are just super cool guys. Dr. Phil, everybody knows who that guy is on Instagram, right? Probably.
Oh yeah, we had him on the podcast. I don't know, a couple months ago, and he was a great guest.
Yeah,
for sure.
yeah. No, this community is just awesome. I have a lot of respect for everybody in this community, and whoever has questions or needs help with anything machining, not just programming, machine selection, work holding, fixturing, ideas. If you have a problem, I've probably seen it, and I probably have a solution for it. So don't hesitate to reach out. Anything machining related, I'm always happy to help anybody in the community anytime. Uh, I like to pay it back, or pay it forward, however that. So appreciate you guys having me on.
Yeah,
that's our pleasure. Definitely. Well, again, thank you so much. We will see you guys next week for an episode with just Peyton and I, and have a great night, guys.